Okay, members. The next item on the order paper is a motion on backlog in MOT testing. Clerk, would you please read the motion?
That this Assembly stresses the importance of fair and timely access to faecal testing across Northern Ireland, believes it is unacceptable that many motorists are facing lengthy delays to secure an MOT appointment, notes with concern the impact such delays have on those living and working in our communities, including in rural and hard-to-reach areas, as well as many businesses, regrets the costly and protracted delays in opening new test centres at Mollusk and Hydebank, expresses alarm at increased fees for MOT testing in the absence of tangible progress toward ramping up capacity, and calls on the Minister for Infrastructure to bring forward an ambitious and costed plan to tackle the backlog in tests, cut waiting times, deal with no-shows, and ensure fair access for those who are currently disadvantaged as soon as possible.
Thank you, Ciara, and I call on Deborah Erskine to move the motion.
Moved.
Okay, Deborah, thank you. The Business Committee has agreed to allow up to 1 hour and 30 minutes for this debate. The proposer of the motion will have 10 minutes to propose and 10 minutes to wind. As an amendment has been selected and is published on the Marshall list, the Business Committee has agreed 15 minutes will be added to the total time for the debate. Please start the debate on the motion, Deborah. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Principal Deputy Speaker. First of all, I want to declare an interest as someone who's waiting for an MOT test appointment, and also my husband's relations work within DVA system. I'm also making my comments today as a Fermanagh and South Tyrone DUP MLA and not as chair of the committee. I propose this motion today, which is of extreme importance to the thousands of people in Northern Ireland at this moment in time. Fairness and timely access to vehicle testing across Northern Ireland is a simple ask. How we ensure that happens needs to be dealt with. We can no longer hide behind the fact that our MOT system is not fit for purpose anymore as it is. Change and an overhaul is now due. I like to think of myself who's fairly on the ball when it comes to my own affairs. However, to remember when my MOT test is due is something, I have to be honest, I never thought of until very recently when the letter dropped through my door. For months and indeed years now, I've been dealing with constituents who are unable to get their MOT test on time. So I duly myself went online to book a test, and at that stage none were available anywhere. And we do have to ask the question, why have we got this situation? Not to mention the fact that drivers in Northern Ireland have seen an increase in pricing, yet they're not seeing bang for their buck, so to speak, when it comes to getting the access to a test. Last week we found out that cracks have now appeared in MOT lifts, and while we await further testing, it raises a number of questions. Again, how have we managed to get into this situation? A crack is a crack in testing equipment, and it isn't good enough, no matter what gloss people try to paint over it. And for the DVA Chief Executive to come out and say that 72-day wait for MOT tests is now the normal, well, it shouldn't be, and we shouldn't just accept that. When we compare the number of full tests conducted at each of DVA's testing centres in January 2024 with the situation in January 2019, we see that 10 out of the 15 test centres of those sites were operating at a reduced capacity compared to 5 years ago. And last week we were told by DVA that 1.15 million tests have been carried out, the highest on record, but we still have an issue within our MOT testing service. And let's be honest with ourselves, the crisis in MOT testing has been brewing before the pandemic, with long-term neglect of the DVA estate, initially led to suspension of testing services in December 2019, January 2020, due to problems with lifts. And in February 2022, I spoke in this chamber about the effects and problems with getting MOT tests, and I'm still raising those issues in this chamber today. And the issues facing in particular rural drivers, drivers going further to access an appointment. How have we got to a stage in our system in which we have drivers which may or may not be driving a car which is not roadworthy, but may unknowingly find themselves on the wrong side of the law because they have to travel distances for a test due to no fault of their own, really? It's quite frankly appalling. Where also is a regional balance? MOT test centres in the West have not had much investment in the last 10 years. There's genuine concern around regional inequalities, given that often public transport routes are less well developed in those communities, and the implications of not being able to secure a test are more profound. The role and value of this public service has been undermined by a failure to show the right leadership to tackle this issue. And at this point, I just want to say and put on record thanks to the DVA testing staff for the work that they do. They are carrying out tests 7 days a week, and we appreciate that, but something has to change. Many have asked themselves whether a framework based on private vehicle testing would provide better and fair outcomes. And I recognise there is a challenge in that for DVA and DFI. They must, however, be in a position to respond to that criticism and demonstrate why these services ought to be managed and regulated in this way, rather than, I know the Minister has ruled it out in the media within the last day. So we need to understand why, because there is an awful lot of public commentary today around privatisation and what that looks like. In relation to the SDLP's amendment, whilst I welcome what they're saying in relation to it, I do wonder why there needs to be another call for evidence on biannual testing. Their own Minister, Nicola Mallon, brought forward a call for evidence in August 2021 on the matter, and in February 2022 the results were published. Interestingly, in overall terms, the outcome was clear for private cars and motorcycles, with some 80% and 77% respectively of respondents believing that MOT testing for those vehicle categories should be done on a biannual basis. But yet, it was interesting at the Infrastructure Committee last week, because officials came and stated that they aren't looking into biannual testing at this moment in time. So what is the department doing to tackle this issue? A survey by Northern Ireland's largest price comparison site, CompareNI.com, found that over half of Northern Ireland drivers, 58%, admitted that they were driving on roads past their MOT date as a result of booking issues, meaning over half of our vehicles here could be unroadworthy. The survey also found that 42% of drivers in Northern Ireland had to wait for a cancellation just to book an MOT slot. When it was possible to book a slot, 43% had to wait over 3 months for their appointment. Those figures point to a critical situation. Some drivers have also stated that they've had to visit their local repair garages for safety checks and other measures, which is right, and we welcome the fact that they are doing that to keep their cars roadworthy. But this effectively amounts to having to pay in lieu as well, as another added on to a valid MOT. Simply stating that Mollusk and Hyde Bank will be open and all our problems will disappear is, in some respects, wishful thinking. First, we need staff and capacity in the system, and second of all, we need the plan going forward. I recognise that there was some 50,000 no-shows, and that is a problem as well. And from this chamber, we have to say, if you have an MOT appointment, please turn up, please go. And we should be drilling down into those figures to find out why such huge numbers were not turning up for their MOT appointment. Was it that those people got earlier appointments and the system didn't correct the cancellations? Is it genuine no-shows? And if so, what can we do to address that number? Not least, do we need a public message campaign in relation to this? I want to see improvements happen, and I am in solution mode, and I want to see an ambitious costed plan come forward. Whether measures need to be introduced temporarily or whether we need to see measures, and we do need to see measures, implemented for the long term, we must grasp this issue in the here and now before the situation gets any worse. So I commend this motion to the House. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah, and I call on Mark Durgan to move the amendment. Thank you. Mark, you have 10 minutes to propose and 5 minutes to wind, and all other speakers will have 5 minutes, so please open the debate on the amendment.
Vehicle testing as a topic, always guaranteed to spark debate. Bizarrely, it seems to stoke greater furore than access to healthcare or the bit-by-bit dismantling of our welfare system. I've received more messages ahead of today's debate than I did on school uniform costs or tackling health waiting lists. But I suppose that's down to the frustration caused by the current process, and the chances are, if you own a vehicle, you've been affected by these issues. The new normal of a 72-day wait has been bandied about, and that's for the lucky ones. But it isn't normal. Just last night I received an email from a constituent who'd been trying for weeks to get an MOT appointment for their elderly mother's vehicle, but has finally had to settle for one in Enniskillen, many miles away, 5 months away as well. The current system is proving stressful, time-consuming, and forcing people to take time off work to travel further afield for appointments. Now, these problems aren't new, and I mean there are several. They've been compounded by a multitude of issues, be it cracks, COVID, cost of living, and wider global economic issues. And while significant effort and investment has been made to increase capacity, problems persist. Since 2009, Northern Ireland has consistently had more private light goods vehicles pro rata than Great Britain. We're a more car-dependent population, which is problematic in itself. That said, it's clear that the number of cars on our roads is growing year on year, and the required infrastructure, be that our actual road network or, in this instance, MOT testing centres, can't and are not, or is not keeping up. Staff are working as full pelt, trying to get as many appointments through the doors as possible. Each year, the DVA are conducting record-breaking numbers of vehicle tests, and I'd like to, like the proposer of the motion, place on record our appreciation of the additional work that they've undertaken, particularly over these past few years. But despite workers' Herculean efforts, the waiting lists remain too long. Doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results, is insanity. We need government to at least try and do things differently. Over the course of the weekend, the Minister has ruled out the use of private garages, and while I actually share the Minister's view on privatisation, I would urge him just not to jump to any decisions until he listens to all the arguments put forward. It's evident that major change is needed, even on a temporary basis, to tackle lengthy delays. And on that note, I wish to move or propose the SDLP amendment calling for public consultation on biennial MOT testing for vehicles under 10 years old. 2 years ago, DFI was to consult publicly on biennial testing, but that hasn't happened. There was overwhelming support, as Ms Erskine has said, for the move in summary findings published in February 22 following a call for evidence issued by then Infrastructure Minister Nicola Mallon. The next step was to be public consultation on specific proposals. The wheels were in motion, but it seemed from committee on Thursday we learned that someone has put their foot on the brakes. I wonder if the Minister could clarify if he knows why the department seemed to have U-turned on this issue. Even if this measure was introduced temporarily, it would help massively to clear the current backlog. I'm aware that there were dissenting voices from the automotive industry opposing two-year testing on safety grounds, and of course no one in here would wish to do anything that would compromise safety. However, the extent to which vehicle roadworthiness is involved as a primary or even contributing factor in collision causation is relatively minuscule. The bulk of road traffic collisions here are as a result of driver distraction or excessive speeding, and according to the police figures for 2022, vehicle defects were cited as causation factor for just 1.2% of all collisions. Moving to a two-year cycle could act as a pressure release valve to allow the completion of the new testing centres and an assessment of new testing capacity. Cars over 10 years old could continue to be subject to annual inspection given their higher risk profile. We believe this to be constructive and relatively easily implemented proposal that will provide immediate relief to staff and motorists alike. But at least let's have the conversation, and I hope members across the Assembly will support us in this call. Solving these problems requires new thinking. DVA continue to promote the new testing centres at Hydebank and Mollusk as their great white hope, the fail-safe solution. And notably, again, as the proposer said, we hadn't been comparing notes beforehand. There's been no recognition of need west of the ban, despite the heavier reliance on private vehicles as a result of poorer connectivity and access to public transport in this locality. That said, I can't accept that investment in these continually delayed projects will prove a panacea. Many questions remain unanswered. We've heard that DVA staff are conducting more tests than ever before. So how will these new centres be able to meet that demand? Will staff vacancies be filled by staff redeployed from elsewhere? Will this result in a knock-on impact that will see the closure of other existing test centres? How will these centres effectively improve capacity if we can't recruit and retain the workforce that's needed to run them? It would be short-sighted, or it is short-sighted, to throw more money at an issue without a comprehensive plan. But hey, that's the way this place rolls. Furthermore, it's envisaged that these centres will facilitate, or is it envisaged that these centres will facilitate the introduction of diesel emissions testing? It would be remiss of me not to mention DVA's 17-year failure to comply with this legal requirement. I know it's a case of ongoing legal action, so the Minister will be curtailed in terms of what he can say about it, but it is unacceptable in anyone's book that this serious failing has been allowed to continue, compromising air quality, public health, as well as the natural environment. The Executive does need to live up to its environmental obligations, never mind its aspirations. Action on the big issues is one thing, but there does seem to be a general reluctance or recalcitrance to embrace even apparently simple solutions or improvements, like earlier notification that an MOT test is due. Reminder letters are issued 6 weeks prior to an MOT expiry date, yet the online booking system permits customers to book for 3 months in advance. At last week's committee meeting again, it was inferred that issuing earlier reminders would place even greater demand on the online booking system. But and I don't think it was alone among committee members, would tend to disagree and would be of the view that affording more time would allow motorists to plan and would save people from scrambling at the 11th hour. It could also help to reduce the extraordinarily and unacceptable high number of no-shows, certainly.
It might also help people that, like those who are in my constituency, older people who find driving long distances extremely difficult, and therefore when they say that they need to travel, for instance, from Newtownards to Enniskillen, that they're not going to go to do that MOT and instead will sit at home without a car?
I fully concur with the point that the member has made. There are not just older people who dread the use of the virtual highway in the first place to try and navigate the appointment system, let alone then the having to travel unacceptable distances and intimidating distances for those who are unused to it. Lastly, the challenges with testing infrastructure, including hairline cracks on hydraulic equipment, could present serious logistical problems. Action is needed now to combat any fallout and further pressure on the system down the line. The MOT process in its current form isn't working. It's clear that resolving it requires a cocktail of measures, from putting in more resources, recruiting more staff, to potentially introducing biennial testing. I'd ask the Minister and his department to employ new thinking. We need to drive change, not stunt it.
Thank you. Margaret Call on Donny Baker.
It is vitally important the MOT backlog is addressed and people can get their vehicle tested in a shorter time frame. Many people have been left frustrated trying to get their vehicles tested since 2019, when cracks were found in 48 of the 55 vehicle lifts across the north and the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic causing further delays. My office, like many MLA offices, are dealing with complaints and have helped to advise constituents on the best way for them to access an MOT service. Many constituents worry about being penalised because they don't have their MOT in time, and it's worth stating that the PSNI has agreed that those drivers whose MOT has expired will not be penalised, providing their vehicle is roadworthy, doesn't have an off-road notification declaration, that their vehicle is insured and a test appointment has been booked. The lack of an MOT certificate would not necessarily invalidate your insurance, but it's important to check with your insurer. And I have had many elderly constituents who have needed help with the online booking system, especially when needing an emergency MOT when people's tax is running out. And my office has been more than happy to help in these situations, and we have managed to get constituents emergency appointments. At the committee last week, we heard from the DVA that they conducted nearly 1.2 million vehicle tests last year, which is the highest number ever recorded. Last year there was only 7 days in which the DVA did not offer MOT appointments. The increase in capacity had been achieved through a range of measures, including recruitment of additional vehicle examiners, the use of overtime to provide cover for leave, and offering vehicle test appointments on Sundays and bank holidays when testing was not normally available. And I would like to thank staff who have been working hard since the backlog began, as well as during COVID, to tackle the challenges people face in getting MOT appointments. We also heard from the committee that further recruitment went live in February to fill the staff vacancies across the DVA's network of test centres. Meanwhile, the plan for the new test centre at Haybank in Belfast is nearing completion. The construction contract for the second new test centre in Mollusk has been awarded, and that new test centre is expected to be open in 2025. The DVA did highlight their frustration that the number of vehicles that failed a booking appointment in 2022-23 was the highest on record at over 50,000, and that's nearly a month worth of bookings. While measures have been taken to increase capacity and tackle backlogs, and that the effort by the DVA staff must be commended, it is clear that the backlog is still frustrating drivers and learning drivers across the north. My office will continue to support constituents struggling to get a booking, and in particular those in need of an emergency appointment to get their vehicle taxed. I do hope that these new sites and recruitment will go some way to reduce people's frustrations and help that the backlogs and waiting times across the north.
Thank you, Donna. I call Peter McReynolds.
Thank you, Deputy Principal Speaker. I rise to welcome today's motion, and I'd like to start my remarks, similar to others, by putting on record my gratitude to DVA staff who have consistently gone above and beyond during periods of significant disruption and rising demand. As we've just heard, 1.15 million MOTs were carried out in the last year, a 25% increase on the year before and the most on record, and I commend the commitment and dedication of our staff across Northern Ireland. Deputy Principal Speaker, today's motion is important and it is welcome. And like all members here, my inbox and social media has been flooded with messages and emails of concern and frustration at how difficult it has been to get access to a reasonable and timely appointment for vehicle testing. This has led to concern and anxiety for individuals and families who rely on their car for living and working in our communities, as the proposer has noted in their motion, but also completely unnecessary and lengthy car journeys in the face of increased congestion and cars on our roads. For example, just yesterday, a friend messaged to say he was booking his annual MOT, but there were no appointments in any of our centres across Northern Ireland. They joked how they were now considering a ferry to Stranraer, and that's something that I've heard a lot over the weekend. Another, they were able to obtain one at New Buildings from where they lived in Ballyclare. Another, that they had to cancel their appointment due to illness, but were required to drive an hour from where they lived to get a last-minute appointment. Another recurring issue has been that of those unable to get an appointment, therefore unable to renew their car tax, and subsequently being unfairly fined. And I fully appreciate that this is the responsibility of the DVLA, but perhaps the Minister can tell us what he and his officials are doing to make the case to them, to reiterate our different circumstances here and the challenges that many have been facing. Two further key issues that have been brought to my attention in the last few days, specifically on this, has been the date of the renewal letters, as we've heard already today, and if they can be issued sooner so that people can be better prepared. Moreover, I'd be keen to know if temporary exemption certificates could again play a role in reducing waiting times if used in a specific and limited circumstances. I'd also be grateful to the Minister if he could respond to that point whenever he's closing later as well. Deputy Principal Speaker, as someone new to this Assembly and the Infrastructure Committee, I've spent my time over the last few weeks reading up on the issues facing the Department and the Minister, meeting with officials and groups, and looking back over the work of the last committee, who did great work providing suggestions on how to improve the MOT testing system. I was pleased to see the last Minister, as we've heard from Mr Durkin, Nicola Mallon, conducted a call for evidence on today's amendment, the introduction of biennial testing. There were some good points in that document, and I think moving towards a consultation and potentially even a pilot would be a welcome and reasonable approach to explore, as it's clear that there are many adaptations to the current system to improve things. Deputy Principal Speaker, as we've heard, there are various reasons for the current lengthy waiting times, from cracks and lifts to people driving older cars, more people driving than ever before, and it would be remiss of me not to speak to this last point given our reliance and dependence on private vehicles here in Northern Ireland. I hope to always be a voice for public transport and active travel in this chamber, and a key part of this debate and discussion should always be addressing our reliance and dependency on private cars and ensuring that the public have good access to good quality multimodal transport to be able to move around, not least in the face of a climate emergency. Deputy Principal Speaker, I welcome today's motion and amendment. I look forward to working on this matter within the Infrastructure Committee, and I look forward to the later response from the Minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I call John Stewart.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker, and I want to thank the proposers of both the motion and the amendment for bringing it forward today, and just to say that from the outset the Ulster Unionist Party will be supporting both. Principal Deputy Speaker, has already been alluded by all the speakers so far, this is a massive issue in terms of the amount of correspondence that we get from constituents both by telephone and by frustrated messages, and it has gone from frustration to fury for many of them as they continue to seek to get an MOT in a timely fashion. And I think the big question they ask is just why can it be so difficult? And I've said before, particularly at the committee last week, that in the rest of the United Kingdom an appointment time or a wait time is measured in hours or a day or two, and here it's measured in months. We heard last week it was 72 days on average, but anyone who tried to get on today will see that there's not even one available. And last week it was quoting August, although you couldn't book it because it's too far in advance. So that frustration has grown to fury, and people just want to know that this solution, there will be a solution found, and that we're working tirelessly to find that. And I look forward to hearing the Minister later going forward as to what that will be. There are some, Principal Deputy Speaker, who are trying to pitch this as a battle between those who are suggesting alternatives and those who want the status quo as a battle between public sector workers and not in privatisation. That is not the case, and I've said on record, as is everybody here today, that those workers who are in our 15 sites are working tirelessly around the clock, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, to do 1.1 million MOTs. But it's not enough, because the backlog's continuing. There are more cars on the road year on year, and unless some of us in here can invent a 9-day week, the current system will not resolve the backlog, even with the proposed changes and new sites at Highbank and Mollusk. And I think that's why, Principal Deputy Speaker, we need to see some alternatives and not just rule them out, but actually engage and look at what can be potentially done. And at last week's Infrastructure Committee, I suggested, having corresponded with a number of those within dealerships, to see whether they could do it, not in a privatised way, but they send tens of thousands of cars each year to MOT prior to selling them. They maintain them for 5 years through servicing, and then whenever they're due an MOT, they get MOT through the existing sites and they go into the private market for sale. If they were able to use their facilities on site to take a chunk of the MOT system out of the system itself, that could potentially be a game changer for the process. And I have spoken to many of them, I'm sure the Minister has as well, and they have the technology and they're ready and waiting to do that. Others would say they would be operating out of self-interest, but I don't agree. I mean, they are trusted to build the cars, to service them for 5 years, and when they sell them with warranty. So it will be in their interest to prepare them and maintain them. Absolutely.
I thank the member for letting me intervene, but it's just to point out we do know that there are issues elsewhere in relation to some of these things, and so has he thought about what we can do from a Northern Ireland perspective to circumnavigate some of those issues, because we can't stick our head in the sand and pretend that there aren't issues in the likes of England and places like that where it is privatised.
Absolutely, and I thank
members an extra minute, John,
for her intervention. Undoubtedly, we have heard that. I would say one thing: Northern Ireland's a very small place, and we all know the mechanics who do work on our cars. And I can tell you now, if there's anybody at their work, within a day it would be all over social media that they were taking the hand out of people, and I truly believe that. So yes, why people should be scrutinising what's going on. Ultimately, we still need to go to a mechanic to have our cars prepped for MOT anyway. So, but the proposal I'm making is not a privatisation. It's keeping the existing system with the workers there who are willing to stand still, but at the very least under licensing, letting these dealerships who have the technology and the tools in place to operate a system. And like I say, even just to consult on it, absolutely.
Member for Gilmac was quite an interesting debate. But would the member explain to the House what private operator here, what garages out there are able to facilitate a modern MOT test? And would they need regulation or legislation to be able to do that?
Happy to come back. Well, I've spoken to a number of the big ones. I don't want to name them here, but I'm sure I can put you in contact with them, or we can bring them towards the committee who've said that they have the technology in place, and if they didn't, they'd be more than happy to bring it in. Obviously, we need to change regulations because currently there is legislation for quite strictly guiding how we do MOTs here. All I'm asking for is a scoping exercise to see what's possible. I think everything needs to be on the table. That was the point the member made earlier today and in the debate, that we need to look at every possible option, because just doing what we've always done is just going to give us the same results. And if we continue to see more cars on the road, and with the current system, I don't see how that it's going to change anything else. Principal Deputy Speaker, a couple of other points have already been raised. There is a massive impact in terms of digital highway as well in the system that we do. Garages have told me, mechanics have told me, the amount of people they are actually booking MOTs for and taking cash for is going up, because some people out there don't have debit cards, some people don't have access to the internet, so we need a flexibility in that as well. Much has been heard too about the 50,000+ people who don't turn up for an appointment. Again, that is frustration, and if anybody's out there listening, I'm sure we could appeal to them to do more to try and avoid that. But we do need to see a more flexible approach in terms of the cancellations. I think it's 48 hours beforehand that you can't amend that booking or transfer it. If there was an ability to transfer that to somebody they knew who needed an appointment, it would be an option also. Much has been made as well about the tax issue. I had a constituent last week, Principal Deputy Speaker, last month, who was 3 or 4 days beyond their MOT, and subsequently their tax had expired. They drove to Belfast because they needed the car for work and were clamped by the Tax Enforcement Office through no fault of their own. I mean, that is simply unacceptable, and this is happening more and more. And I appreciate people say if you contact the department, you will get one urgently. But that can still take a few days, and it might mean driving to the far side of the country. So it's not ideal. There's also an issue arising from the delays at the minute too, where roadside assistance is not being able to be availed of too. So, like I say, I support the motion and the amendment today, Principal Deputy Speaker, and look forward to hearing from the Minister.
Thank you, John. I call on Keith Buchanan.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. I welcome this motion. It is a timely opportunity for the House to recognise the problems constituents across Northern Ireland are experiencing obtaining MOTs. This is not only affecting private vehicle owners, but also cars who are in the car business, including second-hand car dealers and dealerships. This crisis in MOT testing is nothing new, but now worse. Prior to the pandemic, there were already delays due to problems with the MOT tests in Northern Ireland when MOTs were first suspended in January 2020 due to safety concerns about equipment being used during the tests, when cracks were found in 52 of the 55 lifts being used at testing sites. What evidence can the Minister give that there is now no backlog directly related to COVID or previous lift issues? It is time for DVA, the Department and the Minister to provide a step change, or public confidence will continue to wane. Action and accountability must be the foundation of the Minister's action from this point onwards. New hairline cracks have appeared in equipment across DVA testing centres. Have lessons not been learnt? The Department and DVA should be ensuring all their equipment is fit for purpose. There should be adequate warranty and support from the manufacturer and the equipment purchased, but that the equipment purchased will not become affected in such a short period of time after recent replacement. Is there a contingency plan in place to ensure there can be continuity and access to service during any future lifts or any damage or lift issues in the future? During the inspection and repairs to any lifts with cracks, will all centres remain operational? On a weekly basis, my office takes calls from private owners who are trying to access MOTs for their vehicles. Frustration is growing as many are not able to get tests until July or August of this year. When booking a test, there are many not internet friendly who do not have or cannot use the internet to book or change their appointment. The phone line is also extremely busy. They are becoming increasingly frustrated as they do not have or cannot rely on a good public transport system, therefore the need of their vehicle to be able to carry on with their daily life, more so in the rural areas of Northern Ireland. I appreciate that there has been a slight increase in the number of vehicle tests in recent years, but as with all business, DVA and the Department should anticipate an increase in their business. They should have in place a contingency plan and ensure that they have adequate capacity to respond to increasing needs. Another common complaint I hear is reminders are not sent, as previously stated by others members, with respect to the timeline for your MOT coming up. The whole letter of reminders and obtaining a booking is not working. Sometimes when motorists obtain a date, it is so far in advance of the date of booking, people can forget the booking date and time, therefore leading to the number of no-shows we discussed earlier. Will then the Minister commit to looking at this issue of reminder letters in a timely manner? Also, the second-hand motor trade have contacted me directly. Some businesses can be selling between 30 to 40 cars a month, and they are finding it difficult to obtain MOTs in a timely manner. The difficulty of booking one test for a private individual, then multiply that by 30 times in 1 month. One business told me this is a full-time job, getting appointments and driving all over the country when they eventually get them booked. Why do businesses, as in second-hand dealers, not have the same access or options as taxi drivers to access MOTs? Like taxi drivers, second-hand car dealers and dealerships require access to timely MOT appointments, as this is their livelihoods. Jobs depend on these sales, and therefore any delay can affect not just the owner of the business, but their employees, buyers and the local economy. Businesses cannot be expected to travel the length and breadth of Northern Ireland to access MOTs for the vehicles they are trying to sell, and indeed individuals travelling across NI, I think previous members had referred to this, at expense, lost production time or productive time of their productive time, and environmental impacts of travelling back and forth across Northern Ireland. Second-hand dealers experience the pain of trying to register a previously registered GB car onto the system here in Northern Ireland, so that's obviously anybody in the trade bringing GB cars across. This, I understand, is a phone call system, and then they have to try and navigate and get MOTs for those vehicles that they bring in from mainland GB. Is the Minister content that the capacity is operating as it should? In a briefing to the committee, it was indicated that over 1.1 million cars was carried out between 2022 and 2023. Are the centres staffed to the correct level to achieve maximum output of the 15 centres currently? And will the additional new centres be able to attract the correct staffing level to achieve their possible output figures? The current 20 minutes to test a vehicle, how has this figure been arrived at, and is it required? Can it be reduced? If you refer to some recent figures, I think the member previously had mentioned, out of the 15 test centres from January 19 to January 24, 2/3 of them is operating at a lesser reduction. Yes, overall capacity has been increased from 82,184 to 83,755. But for example, Armagh 4,447 is now 3,600. Coleraine 5,800 is now 5,300. So 2/3 of the test centres are reduced capacity. Yes, the total capacity is up by 1,000. So I would now ask the Minister.
Remarks to a close.
In closing, I hope the Minister in his remarks will provide a solution to the general public and business depending on the MOT centres. Thank you.
Point of order.
Thank you. It's disappointing because I have come today to hear from the Minister in relation to responding to our motion in the Chamber. And just as I'm sitting here in the Chamber, news is breaking online of the proposals that the Minister is going to bring forward before this debate has even finished, which is really disappointing that that would be the case, that the media would have had sight of the proposals that are going to be announced today before this chamber has had an opportunity to hear them from the Minister directly.
Okay, so Deborah, the Speaker last Tuesday said that any points of order that were raised today, he's going to deal with them tomorrow when he's back. So if you're content, we'll just leave it at that. Okay. Brown is the next speaker. Patrick.
Deputy Speaker, and I just had a quick check on Twitter there to see if any of my comments would be out of date by the time this speech is finished, but I wasn't able to find anything just yet, so we will proceed regardless. I rise to speak in support of the motion, which I recognise gives voice to significant frustration and anger within the general public who have had to face unacceptable delays to vehicle testing services for the last number of years. It is absolutely clear that urgent action must be taken by the Minister to deal with this issue, and we welcome the motion's call for an ambitious and costed plan to tackle the MOT backlog and associated issues. And he wouldn't be the first Minister to try to begin addressing the problem. As Mr Durkan has pointed out, Minister Mallon opened a call for evidence on biennial testing in August 2021, seeking views from individuals, industry and other key stakeholders. This call for evidence produced valuable data regarding the merits and levels of support for biennial testing as a possible solution, and any future consultation or legislation should seek to build on this. And on that basis, we do support the amendment calling for further consultation. It's disappointing that there wasn't time in the last mandate to carry out that consultation exercise. It's also disappointing that despite most parties here identifying biennial testing as a possible solution, only one political party actually managed to respond to the call for evidence. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the current DAERA Minister for his diligence in responding to it and outlining our party's support for a trial of a 4, 2 and 1 year testing regime depending on the age of the vehicle. This call for evidence found that 85% of individuals would support biennial testing for private cars, with majorities also in favour of this for light goods vehicles and motorcycles. Whilst we recognise there are legitimate concerns about moving to a biennial system amongst industry, NIPSA and the PSNI, we do on balance feel that a trial of this approach can be a solution to addressing the backlog without compromising road safety standards or negatively impacting on the private sector. And it's clear we must do something. All of us will have been inundated in recent years by constituents at their wits' end, spending hours and potentially having to travel across the country to secure an appointment, often months down the line, all the while dealing with the stress of not knowing if their vehicle is roadworthy or not. The current system is simply not working. This backlog particularly impacts on rural constituents such as those I represent. As the motion correctly recognises, they are more likely to have to travel further or wait longer for an appointment to become available at their local test centre, with the associated costs and stress of this. I know personally that I've basically given up on getting a test at the Downpatrick testing centre in recent years, and now usually have to travel to Ards as my nearest centre, though I'll point out with the member for Strangford behind me, it's always a lovely experience travelling up to Ards, of course, but many others are not so lucky and will have to go much, much further than that for a test. And of course, this situation has only gotten worse during the 2 years in which we have had no elected ministers to make the decisions necessary to deliver change in the MOT system. I believe that the Minister has been right to rule out privatisation as an option. Our system, when operating properly, is far superior to the GB system, with Northern Irish drivers often spending far less on annual repairs thanks to an impartial testing regime with no reduction in safety standards. There is no doubt that a full-scale move towards privatisation could leave many road users out of pocket with no standardised means of identifying the mechanical work needed to pass an MOT. We need to make this system work, not scrap it. That is why we would call on the Minister to urgently implement a clear plan of action to tackle the backlog, address lift failures, sort delays in new testing centres, publish clear and accurate data on average wait times, tackle any staffing issues, and finally introduce biennial testing, at least on a trial basis. I wish the Minister well in finally seeing these changes implemented.
Thank you. Patrick, I call Harry Harvey, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I welcome the opportunity for a few words on this topic today, and also appreciate the Minister in attendance to listen. Minister, I know on the last mandate it was talked around a bit that we talked about maybe a 10-lane supercentre was obviously talked around. I don't know if this was something was a consideration or is still a consideration, but I was just wondering if that's still something that's being considered. Also, for years, waiting times, and I mean for as long as I can remember, waiting times were around a week till a month. You were recommended book your MOT a month in advance. But I thought it was interesting, Peter said that 25% more cars are getting MOT in this past year, which is interesting. I found that since the new booking system came into operation, where you can book your cars in for MOT online, that's when things started to go wrong. I know we had COVID issues, we had the issues with the lifts. Also, no staff in the MOT centres, I don't think is a good thing. Used to be in all our centres, we could walk in, we could make an appointment. It was great. There's a lot of people now having issues. I'm sure we've all been asked, could you book an MOT for me? So I think that's an issue. I do believe our system here is great. I love the way we do things. I think it can be fixed. I think it's a much better system than the UK system. Also, a lot more cars getting MOT, as I say. 40 years, we're going to end up driving our cars 40 years and they're going to end up being historic museum pieces, so we'll not have to worry about MOT the way things are going. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Harry, and I call Steve Aiken.
Indeed, Mayor, thank the Minister and everybody for the debate so far. Minister, one of the things from my constituents, and some of them have been employed in the vehicle testing centre in Larne, have raised their concerns about is this safety standard of the equipment and the health and safety issues that they've had to face. And the large amount of concern that there is that having repaired so many lifts and other pieces of equipment, we're now in a situation where they seem to have failed again. And there does seem to be some issue about quality control. And has been mentioned to me, Minister, and perhaps your staff could address these issues. It's not just the issues with lifts, but it's also issues to do with atmosphere control within the centres themselves, and it's also issues to do with other forms of equipment. And there seems to be a considerable degree of disquiet that, despite the fact that repairs have been made, we yet again are seeing them failing, and failing at a fair degree of regularity. These are really significant issues for the workers who do these really hard jobs within our MOT centres, and we really have to address these questions. So I'd like the Minister to tell us here today that he is happy with the health and safety of all the equipment that he has within those facilities. And if those mistakes are found, who is actually accountable and responsible for it? Because having had these repairs done at considerable expense, how are we in a situation that they're broken again and nobody's being held accountable for it? And indeed, why aren't we taking the people who supposedly did these repairs to court to actually get recompense? Certainly, Minister.
Which pieces of equipment is the member referring to when he refers to them being broken?
And the member's an extra minute.
Thank you very much indeed. Some of the issues to do with some of the lifts that have shown cracks and soon some cracking again, Minister. And I think maybe the Minister should, and I'm sure the Minister will, because he is a diligent Minister, will make sure he's well informed, and actually his department itself will look very closely at the equipment in the MOT areas, and actually try and gain an understanding of what else is likely to be broken and where the problems lie. Because one of the things we're trying to do is to make our MOT centres effective, but they have to be safe places for the workers in those, Minister. That's something we need to do and something we need to concentrate on. Thank you.
I call on David Honeyford.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for joining us. And I start by following on from my colleague Peter McReynolds and start by acknowledging the great work that goes in by our staff. I think we all, it's been acknowledged around the House that the staff in our MOT centres in extremely challenging conditions and conditions that aren't of their making. we have potentially the best record in Europe and across these islands with vehicle safety. And taking my own car through the process, or my wife's car through the process, our MOT staff have always been professional, courteous, and they produce really high standards. So I want to start by putting that on the record. As been said right across the House, this is one of the issues that we get loads of calls and stuff in the constituency office from people furious at not being able to get appointments, whether that's getting fines for not having tax because they can't get the MOT, and those become issues and become real to people. And it's something that the Assembly, as we look to delivery, this is something and an issue that where we need to start. And if we focus on a few things at the start, this is something I hope the Minister is able to resolve quickly. I also appreciate that the Minister is only in post a matter of weeks, but the Minister was in post before the DUP walked out and before the collapse. He remained the Sinn Féin infrastructure spokesperson during that, and actually I enjoyed sitting with him at the monthly briefings with the Permanent Secretary at that time. But this is an issue that needs resolved and brought forward quickly, and I hope the Minister is in a position to do that, and I wish him well in it. The public don't really need repeating words. We've been hearing that from 2019. They need to see actions on this, and I think it's been demonstrated the kind of frustration throughout the public that has been said here, that it's action that people want to see. Solutions and ideas have been floated, so I'm not going to go into those, but it's been said by DFI that capacity is the problem, and we're holding on to cars longer, and it's been said, I think Peter referenced that earlier. The thing I find really concerning and I'm surprised by is the Department hadn't worked that out years ago, that the number of new cars being sold has been known for years, and that is announced annually. But it's concerning as we're building new test centres that we don't even seem to know how many cars are going to need MOT going forward. And how then has that business model been put together to deliver the service in the first place? I sit on public accounts with chaired by Daniel and Dan's here and Cahill's here as well, and we argued and we debated what one of the first investigations should be for the Auditor General, and that was to look at public procurement. And the MOT centres and the not opening of those new centres highlights a major or potential major procurement issue. We've spent millions of pounds on new test centres, and we haven't got new test centres. Those centres have been delayed for years, and they still aren't open, and they're preventing current test centres from being refurbished and updated. So maybe the Minister can confirm when the new test centres at Highbank and Mollusk are finally going to open, because the dates around that, recently we were told March of this year, now this month, and now it's saying 2025. But it raises a load of questions of whether they've been designed and built for the year in which they're going to open and not when they were designed. And there's obviously a difference in service requirement in the MOT system that has seriously changed from then. And I would question whether the business case to build the MOT centres was capable of fully servicing the situation that we're now in, and for the new capacity that we will need moving forward, because that will bring in that procurement of whether it's value for money. And we question then why procurement and that has been done by DFI and the department and not done centrally, and whether the future is, as I said, built into that business case. All those questions kind of raise, the more you ask, the more you raise questions within this. And I hope I'm not wrong, but it does sound and relates to kind of deja vu in the past. But I want to wish the Minister well, because I know this is an issue that he will want to address and tackle, and it's something that the public need addressed and tackled. And I hope we can get a booking system and get through these and get moved on, that we can get service at a time when it's needed. Thank you, Principal Deputy.
Thank you, David. I call Alex Easton.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. My comments will be short, as many of the points have already been clearly stated. There is no doubt that the current MOT system is broken. This, in my opinion, stems back to COVID, which led to a huge backlog of vehicles not being able to get their MOTs. This has led to this broken system, and a computer-broken system that either does not seem to work properly or can't cope with the demand. I've been inundated with complaints from residents within my own constituency who either have to wait weeks or months, and over this time period they needed their MOTs to drive legally, often having to travel as far as Enniskillen to get an MOT. That, Minister, is not acceptable. 3 principal reasons underpin the importance of today's debate on the MOT. The first 2 are self-evident: road safety and environmental impact. The third I will highlight is the importance to the economy. But firstly, it is important to take ownership of the delays, to accept the legitimate criticism and frustration of road users who are doing everything right but are being caught in this situation through no fault of their own. This situation is not okay. We need to look at why getting it right on a timely manner is important, but simply getting it right protects not only drivers but passengers and cyclists. It protects the environment, and while we may disagree on the level of climate change, we must own our own contributions to preventing environmental issues, in this instance through exhaust emissions. Furthermore, with regular MOT testing, the sustainability of the vehicle is extended, leading to savings to the driver and less environmental impact with disposal and manufacture. There is need to plan. The old adage, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, is particularly relevant here. Accountability is critical. It is simply not good enough to charge increasing fees without showing quality services. The road users deserve better. With the cost of living crisis, the importance of the used car market is evident. Let us be consistent on the value an MOT test brings to confidence in this market. It does so by giving the buyer confidence in the condition of the vehicle, promoting the integrity and efficiency of the used car market, an important part of the economy across Northern Ireland and in my own North Down constituency. Minister, across other parts of the UK, they are using reputable garages and dealers to deal with backlogs. Why can't we do that? To not do so does not make sense to me, and it is common sense that needs to find practical solutions. So in conclusion, let's get this right through collective action and planning and delivery. Get an effective MOT system promoting not just delivery of a safer and greener Northern Ireland, but also contributing to our collective well-being, and let's use a bit of common sense. The solution is actually out there. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Alex. The next speaker will be the Minister for Infrastructure to respond. Minister, you'll have 15 minutes.
And before I enter the substantive debate, can I say to members of the House that yes, there was a press release prepared for this debate. It was embargoed until 7 p.m. this evening, so I don't know why it is in whatever media outlets it's in. I've asked my department to follow that up because I do respect the Chamber. And I expect, and as would be expected, I come here and I respond to the debate and inform members of my plans. So I apologise to the House for that happening, and I'll follow it up. So I also want to thank Deborah Erskine and Keith Buchanan and Steve Dunn for raising the debate on MOT testing. There has been significant political and media interest in the delivery of DVA services, not just recently, but over the last few years. And it's timely that I address the Assembly's advice of the steps that the DVA has taken to increase its vehicle testing capacity and further proposes to address the continued high demand for its essential services, which, as everyone knows, increasing demand and it's difficult to meet, but we have to plan for it and meet it. In 2022-2023, as has been said, the DVA conducted over 1.5 million vehicle tests, which is the highest number ever recorded in a year. They achieved this by recruiting additional vehicle examiners and by offering vehicle testing appointments on Sundays and bank holidays when testing is not normally available. Indeed, DVA centres were open every day last year apart from 7. I cannot think of any other public service that is open to the public or more accessible to the public other than health than open. So certainly, I'll give away briefly and then I'm not giving away out because
days and the people in it are doing a great job, but the figures don't tell lies. 2/3 of the centres are underperforming. They're doing less tests now than they did in 2019.
Then Keith would suggest that the staff working in those centres are underperforming, and I reject that. The staff are working hard. They're carrying out overtime. We cannot force staff to do overtime, but many staff are doing overtime. So the staff that are the centres that are open, and the staff in them are performing a significant public duty over and above the call of duty on many occasions, and I commend them. And I think far too often this debate has understandably been negative, and the butt of that negativity has been the staff. The staff are doing their job. We have to ensure they're given the resources and the facilities to do their job. The DVA continue to greatly exceed pre-COVID levels of vehicle testing as they try to manage the continuing high demand for this public service. Disappointingly, over 50,000 customers failed to attend a booked appointment in 22-23, which was also the highest on record. In a survey conducted by the DVA, the most common reason given by customers were that they simply forgot, which calls into question as to whether the MOT test is too expensive. They simply forgot their test, their vehicle was not ready for the test, or they had sold the vehicle. The DVA's new booking system has the facility to issue an email and SMS reminder to customers 2 days before their test is due. Previously, customers had to opt in to receive these reminders, but DVA updated the system in July 23 to issue the reminders automatically unless the customer chooses to opt out. This appears to be having a positive effect, which will hopefully be reflected in future statistics. However, the demand for MOTs is increasing, driven by increasing numbers of cars of MOT age on our roads. The cost of living crisis means we are owning our cars for longer, and so more MOTs are required. Waiting times for vehicle testing therefore remains longer than usual, and in some cases customers may not be able to have their vehicles tested before their current MOT certificate expires. I recognise the frustration that this causes customers, often requiring multiple visits to the booking system in order to identify a suitable appointment. The DVA has taken steps to ensure that motorists are still able to use their vehicles when they are unable to secure an MOT appointment before their current certificate expires, by securing the support of the PSNI and insurance companies. In addition, anyone who cannot secure an appointment before their tax expires, or their tax has already expired, should complete a short notice appointment request form for an urgent appointment. The DVA currently asks customers to contact them within 5 days of their tax expiry, but I can confirm that with immediate effect, the DVA is extending this window to 10 days to provide more flexibility for customers and reduce any anxiety. And I would encourage members of the House, when contacted by members of the public who are concerned about their tax running out, that there is options available to them. It won't always be their nearest test centre, it won't always be the most convenient, but there are options available. And just on that point, I find it remarkable that we have, as a society and political leaders in our society, we're comfortable telling people to travel quite significant distances to have a medical test or to have a life-changing operation or life-changing treatment. But we're aghast, and some members in the Chamber today have been aghast by the fact that we ask people to travel an extra distance to get an MOT test. Now, there's one I think we could debate at length, where our priorities are in society. I'll give way quickly to the Chair.
I think the point is, and I thank the Minister for giving way, I think the point is we're telling people to travel on roads where their car may be unroadworthy to access an MOT appointment, and they may be doing that unwittingly. And just to say, there's nothing wrong with travelling to Enniskillen for a test appointment.
Well, certainly, the legal position is this. Even if you were to drive out of an MOT centre with an MOT certificate and you were stopped by the police the next day and they found a fault with your vehicle, that MOT certificate doesn't cover you. You're legally responsible for the upkeep of your vehicle at all times. So this idea that we're asking people to travel distances in a car which may be unroadworthy, they are legally responsible for that, and they have to make sure their car is roadworthy. No, I've a lot to get through. Like many public services, and I remind members this is a public service which has faced the same crises and difficulties as other public services, the recruitment and retention of staff has also become increasingly more challenging for the DVA, given the competitive marketplace for mechanics. Positively, however, the DVA vehicle examiners were regraded to the next higher grade in 2023, and the implementation of long overdue public sector pay deals will hopefully stabilise this position. The DVA currently has 55 staff vacancies across its network of test centres, and through Tackling Pay, it has received 133 applications in its recent vehicle examiner recruitment competition. It's anticipated that a successful candidates will begin to be posted to test centres from early June, and this will provide additional capacity for vehicle testings across their network of test centres. I have asked the DVA to release additional appointments for these new recruits as soon as possible. 55 new examiners will provide a hugely significant increase in appointments each year and will be expected to have a positive impact for our customers. The DVA is also recruiting new full-time examiners who will take up positions from late March onwards. This will reduce requirements for dual-role examiners to conduct driving tests, which will also have a positive impact on vehicle testing capacity. To further increase vehicle testing capacity, the DVA is investing in new test centres, as has been said. The construction of Hydebank Test Centre and new office accommodation at the same location commenced in January 2021. Members will be aware this was in the middle of a pandemic, and we were dealing with a public health emergency and the many restrictions that imposed on us all. Inevitably, this and other factors such as global shortage of construction materials caused some delays to the programme of works. However, I am pleased to confirm that the construction works are now complete and the office accommodation is in use. During 2021, considerable difficulties also arose in relation to the equipment implementation contract, and having worked to resolve those issues without success, in February 2022, the DVA issued a notice of termination to the contractor. The contractor sought an injunction, and it's a matter of public record that in August 2022, the court found in their favour by supplying conditions about the successful installation and commissioning of new equipment at Hydebank. The DVA have had to re-engage the contractor, agreeing measures to de-risk the project, and has since been progressing the delivery of a revised work programme with them. The contractor completed the installation and commissioning of new equipment and associated software in Hydebank in early February 2024. The DVA is working with them to complete user acceptance testing to ensure the equipment functions in accordance with the requirements of the tender specifications. Once this is complete, the DVA will put the equipment and software through extensive stress and testing to ensure that it operates to the required standards in simulated test centre environment. I am sure members will agree that it is critical to ensure that the new equipment at Hydebank has been assessed by DVA as safe and fit for purpose before the test centre can open to public vehicle testing. And just on the point a number of members have raised, and Mr Aiken, there is no equipment in MOT centres that has failed in relation to lifts, etc. There has been minor cracks found in a number of the joints by an independent assessor who has assessed them cracks as the lowest category and has confirmed the health and safety of that equipment, and it can continue to be used. There are no lifts out of work or functioning as a result of the detection of these cracks. We have increased our maintenance check-ups on all of these matters and ensure that maintenance and health and safety is paramount for any equipment within our test centres, but all test centres are operating with the lifts in place. The contract for the construction of a second new test centre at Mollusk will commence was awarded on the 25th of January, and works will commence on the site in mid-May, and the test centre is expected to open in autumn 2025. Once fully operational, the two new test centres at Hydebank and Mollusk will provide the capacity to test over 200,000 vehicles per year. In relation to Hydebank, DVA officials are keeping me updated on developments, and subject to successful testing and due diligence on the equipment, I hope to be able to update you and announce the opening of Hydebank Test Centre for vehicles later this year. In terms of increased fees, the DVA has not been immune to the increased cost of all organisations are facing. DVA staff costs, accommodation costs and contracted service costs have all increased significantly. The DVA operates as a trading fund, and they are required to cover the cost of delivering their services from the fees they charge their customers. From the 1st of October 2023, driving test and vehicle test fees have therefore increased. The majority of driving tests had not increased since 2009, and vehicle tests since 2005. The new MOT for cars of £38 still represents good value for money, and is below the comparative figure in Britain of £54.85 and the fee in the south of €55. I appreciate the frustration many customers are feeling, but I don't believe privatisation is the way forward. As some members have been calling for to adopt a similar vehicle testing model to that in Britain through a network of authorised test stations. Let there be no mistake, that is a call for privatisation of MOT services, taking jobs away from valued public sector workers and their families. Those same public sector workers who members are so quick to commend, I will never accept this approach, either today or tomorrow. The existing legislative framework does not allow for it, and I have no plans to change the legislation. And indeed, Britain is an outlier in the private testing of vehicles in this manner. It's also more expensive, and there is concerns around fraud across a number of centres in Britain, which has been much debated elsewhere. As I've said, DVA staff are working extremely hard to reduce waiting times through increasing its capacity. I have asked officials to bring forward other options for my urgent consideration, which might help to relieve pressure on the system, such as the introduction of temporary exemption certificates and proposals to consult on biannual testing, as the motion calls for. As the proposers of the amendment will be aware that DFI undertook a call for evidence on the potential introduction of biannual MOT testing for private cars in 2021. As has been stated, there were over 1,200 responses, and while many of the public support biannual testing, it has to be emphasised the PSNI are opposed to such a measure, and are the insurance industry, who in response said whilst they had concerns about road safety issues, there may also be an issue in relation to increasing costs of insurance because of biannual test. And I'm sure no member here wishes to increase the burden on hard-pressed workers and families by seeing insurance companies racking up their insurance costs. But as I've said, I will explore all matters carefully that have been raised today. It is my intention to ensure that we increase the capacity of DVA to increase the number of MOT tests available. There are measures immediately announced today, and that their measures may take a little longer. I have asked my officials to bring me forward a report, and I hope to respond to the Assembly, a report back to the Assembly after the Easter recess on these matters, which shows the urgency of the matters involved. Just quickly on a number of other matters in relation to west of the Ban. There are a number of sites proposed west of the Ban. There has been land purchased in Enniskillen and Kempsey. It will require further financial clearance, and as has been said, even looking at our business cases to make sure that they're fit for purpose moving forward. Harry had talked about the 10-lane supercentre. I can advise him that we have 8 and 9 coming on board, but not a 10. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on Colin McGrath to move to wind on the amendment.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. And I suppose it's been somewhat of an interesting debate where we were able to read the Minister's remarks before he actually took to his feet to make them, and to see some of the things that he was going to accept. And I suppose as one of them includes the amendment that we have proposed this evening, it's welcome. But I suppose as ever, the devil is in the detail, and it's in that word of "I will explore." So you'll explore these suggestions if they come up from the department. So we still have a bit of a road to travel, and we'll have to see how these things are developed. I suppose the interesting thing from this debate has been that almost every speaker has practically said the same thing. And that puts a bit of a difficulty on the person that's winding, because there is a bit of an onus to feed back what people have said, and everybody has said the same thing. So I don't intend to rehearse them in any great detail. Maybe just as a summary, people are aware from their constituents that it has taken an absolute age to get an MOT test, that can cause considerable stress and pressures because that may not be done in time. People may have to take their cars off the road for a period of time whilst they get the right appointment and chase up an emergency appointment. And we all, through our constituency offices, have those individuals coming in asking for help to try and secure that. Now, I'm not obviously an infrastructure committee member, but if I sort of read it across to being a member of the Health Committee, and we think about many of those in the domiciliary care sector that are out working in the community, providing that valuable community care, they're often representatives from there that are coming to us and saying, if I don't get this MOT sorted out, I'm not going to be able to do my work. And that does link across to several other professions out there as well. I suppose it's really important to get that access opened up for tests in a very timely manner. Just sitting here, we all know you've got that website that you can click on to check when your MOT is actually due. And this debate has prompted me to do that. And I can see that my MOT is due in 8 weeks. And I thought, well, I better get on to the other part of the website, which is to book an appointment. And of course, I'm presented with the fact that I need a booking reference number, which I won't have until I receive that letter. So I can see how I am going to be starting to move towards that territory of it being so late whenever I get the opportunity to apply for the MOT. And I know the Minister and others know the importance of an opposition and that we need to be here. So I'm going to need that car to be able to come up to Stormont, to be able to carry out my workload and to be able to provide that scrutiny. So I hope that once we get the date, I'll be able, if needed, to avail of that service that helps us to be able to get the test a little bit quicker. Maybe for those that aren't necessarily as heavily involved in infrastructure, I certainly was struck to hear over 1 million tests. That was really quite shocking. I thought it was such a large number. And actually, when you think about the number of test centres that we have, which isn't huge, the fact that they actually are undertaking 1 million odd tests every year is quite an achievement. But we know through the cost of living crisis that people are holding on to cars longer. We know that cars generally, newer cars, are of better quality and they're able to last a little bit longer. And certainly that is the main reason for our suggestion of moving to the biennial testing, because we feel that cars, certainly up to the age of about 10, should be relatively safe. They will have warning lights that will come on and indicate if there is something wrong with the vehicle, and that should help. On the issue that was mentioned about the distances for people travelling for testing, one just issue to that is that because of the difficulties in the system, people are crossing each other. So somebody from Enniskillen is maybe having to come to Downpatrick, which is a wonderful thing for them to do. But likewise, somebody from Downpatrick is maybe having to go to Enniskillen. And actually, if the systems were organised in a timely way, it would help people greatly if they were able to access it at their local MOT centre so that it's a minimal amount of disruption. And I think, as was eloquently said, if there is a problem with a car, they're not travelling 80, 90 miles in a car that's maybe not suitable for the road. So the arguments have all been well rehearsed and made. We put forward our suggestion about biennial testing. I welcome that the Minister has said that he will consider that if it comes up, and I just hope that we can get it sorted out, because far too much time is invested in people having to complain to their MLAs about not being able to access a timely MOT test, and we hope that we can get that sorted. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. I call Stephen Dunderwind on the motion.
Deputy Speaker, and I'm very pleased to have tabled this motion here in the House today alongside my two colleagues, Deborah Erskine and Keith Buchanan, on this very important and timely issue as well. And I do welcome the constructive debate in the Chamber today, and I think there has been many good points made and many very valid points as well. And indeed, I thank the Minister for his attendance today, and it is appreciated. And I thought when we seen the article coming through that he might not show, he might miss his appointment here. But we are glad, Minister, that you are here, and we appreciate you listening to us all in this evening. And I think there has been general agreement across the Chamber today that the current system does need improved, and really it's not working as it should be, and that's not despite the efforts of the hard-working staff and so on, which has been acknowledged across the House here today. Trying to get an MOT appointment is a huge challenge, and for so many people, including those of us in the Chamber today, and even within my own constituency office, it is among the most common issues being raised with us. And I think some of the colleagues have mentioned as well how the current system, the way it currently operates, it does cause confusion for motorists, and I think that's an important point. And I think that highlights how we need to see improvements in it. People are asking, are they legally roadworthy? Are they insured? Can they get taxed? These are among the many questions facing many motorists every day on our roads. As others have rightly stated, it is important to acknowledge the work of the staff in our vehicle testing sites right across the country, and the fact, as has been said by a number of people, of over 1.15 million vehicle tests being completed during 22-23, the highest number ever recorded in a year, is testament to that. And I think nobody here is disputing the hard work of the staff. Certainly I didn't hear that in the comments over the last hour plus. The pandemic, as it did across so many sectors, did provide challenges, and I think unprecedented challenges. But I think the time for using the pandemic as an excuse for a poor service is long over. Whilst vehicle tests have increased, as has been talked about during the debate, I do feel we have had a lack of decisive action and solutions coming forward from the previous infrastructure minister. Many of these issues were on their desk at that time as well. But hopefully the current minister will surprise us all and will take real action and deliver an improved MOT service, which is so greatly needed. Last week at the Infrastructure Committee, we heard directly from the DVA Chief Executive, who stated that a 72-day wait for an MOT test is now the new normal in Northern Ireland. Indeed, a stat that was carried on a number of local media outlets. However, today a constituent who I know quite well contacted me, and he booked his MOT online today, and the first date he could get at his nearest MOT centre, which is in Newtownards, was the 8th of August, some 150 days from today's date. That is more than double the new normal, and I believe that is unacceptable. Something has to change, and we need to see innovative ways coming forward, and not just being talked about, but being delivered, and we need to see solutions. And I do believe the Minister has an opportunity to demonstrate that he's up for action, and I think this motion today affords him that opportunity. And I certainly do welcome him coming here today and some of the commitments that he's made towards action. It is interesting to note that the Newtownards MOT Centre conducted the most tests, with almost 11,900 tests completed during the month of January in 2024, and I think that is to be commended. It is the centre that I'm most familiar with, and one used daily by my constituents in the neighbouring North Down constituency. As has been mentioned, the incredibly high number of missed appointments is a cause for concern. Over 50,000 vehicles tests failing to turn up for their MOT, and I think that is no doubt a contributing factor to the backlog. And I think we need to look proactively at ways to address that as well. I also welcome the progress on the new MOT centres, and hopefully they can be fully opened without any further delays. And Mr Harvey might even get 10 lanes if he keeps pressing our new minister. And I think another issue which has been raised recently with me is the option of looking at vehicles only requiring an MOT after 5 years rather than 4. And I think that is a reasonable request, and I think it is interesting to note how in GB they've recently increased it from 3 to 4 years. So I think that does show certainly a direction of travel. I will now turn to remarks made by a number of members this evening, and indeed the Chair of the Committee, Deborah Erskine, rightly raised the issue of new cracks appearing on the lifts, and that is causing concern despite what the Minister may have said today. It does create uncertainty, and it does raise further questions across our local community, particularly I think given the issues that everybody is so familiar with a number of years ago, and it is alarming. And I think there is that fear that it will have an impact on service ultimately. Ms Erskine also highlighted that over half of NI drivers admitted to driving without an MOT, according to a recent survey carried out by Compare NI, and also highlighted the real need for urgent action. Mark Durkin highlighted the stress being created for people and the need for people to travel distances to try and get an MOT, and he stressed how we in Northern Ireland are indeed highly car dependent, and I think that is an interesting statistic, and that came through again at our committee last week, how the number of car users is up, and I think that is ironic given the amount of money that has been spent on, I suppose, discouraging car use through active travel and cycle lanes and so on, but yet car use is up, and I think policy needs to reflect that as well. And obviously the biannual testing was mentioned by Mr Durkin, being through his amendment. Danny Baker talked about the challenges that elderly constituents face accessing MOTs, and he also talked about the recruitment issues that are being experienced at a number of our test centres across our country. Peter McReynolds highlighted concerns from his constituents about being unable to get their car taxed and the need for earlier renewal letters, and I think that is an important point as well. It should be taken on board. And he also, Mr McReynolds, talked about the reintroduction of the temporary exemption certificates, and I think it is worthy to point out how the TECs were useful, particularly during the pandemic. I think everybody benefited from them, and I think that was an idea, an example of innovative ways, and action points that actually did help people on our roads. John Stewart talked about frustrations and the need for alternatives, and I know we talked about that during the committee as well, and the role for car dealerships. Not ruling that out, I suppose that's what Mr Stewart, I think it was fair to say, wanted that to be kept on the table. Keith Buchanan mentioned the previous lift issues and how confidence in our MOT system has been damaged, and highlighted the impact of the most recent cracks on our lifts and the challenges for second-hand car dealers. And indeed, that is an issue that has been shared to me recently, and how the car dealers are also reliant on being able to get an MOT for their vehicles in terms of their livelihood. And I suppose it raises the question: should there be a more dedicated system to car dealers, those people who are depending on getting an MOT, as I say, for their livelihood? Mr Buchanan also finished by talking about the worrying statistic that 2/3 of our MOT centres are underperforming in terms of vehicles actually tested over the 5-year period from January 19 to January 24. And hopefully the Minister will have heard my colleague Mr Buchanan on that issue. Patrick Brown talked about the call for evidence from the last Minister on biannual testing and spoke of our system being superior to that of GB. And I think that is an important point. I think there is a lot of merit in having the independence of our MOT system and the regulation and so on that comes with that. My colleague Mr Harvey talked about the recent changes to our MOT system and how improvements could be made, including the ability to book physically in at our test centres rather than just online, because I think we do need to acknowledge how obviously the digital transformation has transformed how so many of us do business, but I think it's always important to point out that some people do not have that online access, and I think accessibility is an important point to note. So I thank my colleague Mr Harvey for outlining that. Steve Aiken highlighted the failing lifts and the significance of the issue and the importance of staff safety as well. Unfortunately, he's not here to hear my comments, but David Honeyford pointed out how the Infrastructure Minister has considerable experience, and I think that's an important point, that Minister, you're not one of the newest infrastructure ministers in terms of you have served after the May 22 election, I believe, for a number of months, and I think that is an important point Mr Honeyford made. So we're watching you even closer. I think that's important to say, and you served for a number of months as Infrastructure Minister previously, fairly recently, and you also highlighted the rise of car ownership importantly as well. So Alex Easton highlighted how the system was broken and the need for action. Overall, I think most will agree that we have a constructive debate here this evening, and I think we do now need to see action to improve our MOT system. And important we acknowledge that there is room for improvement, and hopefully we can improve our testing facilities and our test results ultimately. And I trust the Minister will take on board our motion, and I commend the motion to the House this evening. Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. So the question is that the amendment standing in the names of Mark Durkin and Colin McGrath be made. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary of any noes? The ayes have it. So the question is that the motion as amended be agreed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary of any noes? The ayes have it. So the last item on the order paper is the adjournment. The question is that the Assembly is adjourned. The Assembly is now adjourned. Cormac.
Assembly Chamber. Sound. Assembly Chamber. Sound.